Greetings programs, greetings adventurers. Today we're going to be going over Demon Hunter speed builds, specifically generatorless, multi-shot, unhallowed essence builds. So we're going to go over a couple of variations. I'm going to get into the base builds, and then I'm going to get into skills, gems, gear, and we'll talk about some variations that you can do based on item and skill choices. Alright, so this is the UE Multishot Speed. This is the version of the generatorless speed build I've been preferring thus far. We are using UE set, which your generators multi-shot and vengeance deal increased damage for every point of discipline you have, so keep that in mind. We're going to want to roll discipline on our quiver, on our chest piece, our cloak, our set cloak. You're going to want to roll it on your bow, of course. And since we're using Stone of Jordan, you definitely want to have max discipline on your Stone of Jordan in this build. 3 rings we are using for this build are SoJ, Convention of Elements, and the Elusive Ring for that extra DR damage reduction. We are using Visage of Goons that gives us Dark Heart. Dark Heart gives 50% damage reduction, and of course we have the damage reduction from the set bonus as well. So it's quite a little bit more tanky of a setup, which is quite nice in my opinion. This particular build we are using Shadow Glide for movement. This gives 30% increased movement. Just having a little bit of extra movement throughout the rift tends to allow you to clear it a lot quicker, and the key thing here is consistent movement. You want something that's up 100% of the time, not up, only half the time. For an area clear type build such as multi-shot, it helps out quite a bit. This is also the main ability we're using to activate our Elusive Ring, so every 5 seconds, just as it comes off cooldown, you're going to want to reactivate the skill. I do recommend at least putting Vengeance and Preparation on Autocast or Numlock. This would make it a lot easier to be able to make sure those abilities are up and make sure your discipline is being recovered over time every so often. Something you want to watch out for is Vault Tumble is equipped in this build, but you really don't want to vault that often. You only want to use this for getting out of those sticky situations, or if you happen to have a power pylon, you can use it to charge ahead a little bit, possibly engage more elites while the power pylon is active on your character. You could also, of course, use it if you have a channeling pylon a lot, but other than that, you want to use it very sparingly because we want to keep up that discipline while we're going through the rift. Let's see, very resource intensive this build. That's why we're going with Vengeance Seethe to get that hatred per second. We're running Bat Companion. Again, as you spam multi-shot, you can just instantly recover to get back that hatred. We have a lot of resource cost reduction. We have the Topaz and the helmet. I'm running an 8% ring for resource, and I'm also running 8% resource on my Dead Man's Legacy. I have tried the build without one of these resource rolls, and it does work just fine at that 61 to 62% discipline cost reduction level. It's just a little bit harder to manage. That's why I do recommend getting at least 2 rolls on gear for RCR. That's in addition to having a fairly highly rolled, I would say at least 46-47% Yangs would be required just to meet the RCR breakpoints. Cooldown, we also have cooldown in this build on shoulder. I have gloves, 1 ring, and of course the Dead Man's Legacy. This is to get that permanent uptime on Vengeance. I, unfortunately, because my cooldown rolls are not perfectly rolled, do not have permanent uptime on Vengeance, but assuming you had higher rolled cooldown on those items, you would be able to meet the breakpoint. I'll list that in a text comment above, because I can't quite remember what it is at the moment. We of course are using Dawn to help reduce the cooldown of Vengeance. This means we only need so much cooldown to hit that breakpoint. passives in this build, there's key synergy between the Ambush, which deals additional damage to enemies above 75% health, and the Dead Man's Legacy hits enemies below 60% health twice, and of course it also does that damage, gives that damage multiplier, which is quite nice. But the synergy between being able to both damage enemies when they're at higher health and damage them quicker when they're at lower health is quite nice, which is why we have this passive in the build. Thrill of the Hunt, of course, is helping to proc our Trapped at range, fairly required for this setup. We're running the Cull of the Weak. It's also a huge damage bonus for this configuration, and Ballistics for using Arsenal for those extra rockets, and the Vengeance will shoot out rockets as well, so getting that extra rocket damage is good to have. We are using the Hellfire amulet in this build. I unfortunately rolled the archery, which I would only say is an adequate passive to use. If I could have rolled a different amulet, and I might attempt to do one in the future, awareness would be a good one to have. It gives you that second life. Steady aim, really good since we're going to be away from enemies most of the rift anyways. Having that extra 20% there would be very nice. Blood Vengeance, a really good passive to have. You could actually, if you have Blood Vengeance, this would help keep up your discipline and your hatred throughout the rift, and you could even drop the Bad Companion, go for Wolf Companion at that point, get some extra multiplier every so often when you're engaging elites, just activate it before you engage them. That would be quite nice to have if you were able to get the Blood Vengeance passive. Another one that might make do is actually Hot Pursuit. This will give you extra movement speed while you're hitting enemies. With this build, you're typically stutter stepping, force moving, and I'm right clicking, force moving, and you're hitting enemies quite a lot throughout the rift. The reason Hot Pursuit, I'd say this one's better than Tactical Advantage, is because this is more of a constant bonus, whereas this one is intermittent and situationally useful. So this would be a lot more beneficial if you happen to get one of those. Another thing to mention is if you happen to get that Hot Pursuit passive, another swap you could make is swap out Shadow Power. You could go for Gloom for some extra damage reduction. That's also an option. But I would prefer to have one of these three, to be honest, but this one is a close fourth passive to get. Other alternate passives, Perfectionist, of course, would be an adequate passive. Archery, as I have, an adequate passive to have. So just keep a lookout for those as well. Let's quickly touch on the other multipliers. We are running CoE, which once it rolls around to fire, helps to clean up those elites and harder to kill monsters as you're moving throughout the rift. Makes it very smooth. The elite damage from the Stone of Jordan does come in really handy. The side effect here is killing white monsters can be a little bit difficult. The benefit, though, is because of the extra damage reduction, you don't necessarily have to target every little monster. You can sort of skip some white trash monsters if need be as you're moving through the rift. And your homing rockets will actually take out the monsters that are behind you that won't necessarily one-shot you. Don't forget the Witching Hour in the belt slot. This gives increased attack speed and increased crit hit damage. For this particular setup, I felt this was the best option, just going for more damage, more attack speed in the slot. Since you are rather tanky, having that increased damage from the slot is quite nice. And then, of course, we are running Nims. Spawn more elites at pylons. Excellent. Other gems, of course, are Zay, Stone of Vengeance for that extra multiplier at range, and Bane of the Powerful, again, giving us some elite damage reduction, and another multiplier to increase our damage. Now, there is another setup that I found fairly speedy, but just less consistent, let me put it that way. It's V2, so you're running the Focus and Restraint in this particular setup. It also uses the Visage of Goons, but we drop the Elusive Ring, so that's the rub with this build, is that it is less defensive. So to make up for that fact, we are shuffling around a few skills. We're going to run Gloom in the Shadow Power rune instead of Shadow Glide, so this will help give us that additional damage reduction that we've sort of lost from dropping the Elusive Ring. Doesn't quite make up for it, but it helps out in that regard. We're also running, instead of the Witching Hour, the Crown's Buff Belt to give us the run speed that we lost from, again, the Shadow Glide rune. Now this won't be up all the time if you're getting hit. Of course it'll drop, but it's there when you need it. When you're not getting hit, you're able to speed through the rift. It does increase the clear speed. Focus and Restraint, of course, you're not going to be using the second bonus, which does make it a little bit inefficient, but I still found it a very fluid setup. You still have the Convention of Elements, it kicks in, does heavy damage. The cool thing about this setup is you do more damage to the trash monsters, so you're able to area clear a lot faster, but I found when it came to killing elites, it was actually slower than the SoJ CoE setup. So just something to try out, see which build you like more, and yeah, I hope you like one of them. These 4 passives, again, just to re-emphasize, are the core passives that you'll need for both setups, and just keep that in mind. Anyway, that's I guess that's it for DH. I'll roll some extra footage, and thank you for watching.